2-1. And welcome to another edition of Montreal Hockey Podcast, Montreal Hockey Now podcast, I should say. Jimmy Murphy here with my co-host Marco D'Amico, and we're honored to be joined by one of the best NHL draft guys out there, but also he knows everything, and he's connected in all levels. So he also can get you a lot of good trade scoops, and he's been around, and he's joining us now, and that's TSN's Craig Button, phoning in from St. John's, New Brunswick at the Memorial Cup. How is that going right now, Craig?
It's been fantastic. You have an environment where everybody is sharing in the experience. In the city of St. John, in the arena, the teams and the players are all having a lot of fun. And we haven't had this since 2019. So, to be part of it, it really is. And you can see the excitement. People in St. John that are just embracing it wholly and fully. And then people that come and travel to the Memorial Cup year after year, they haven't had the opportunity the last 2 years. And so they're excited. So when you have an environment where you have really good hockey and some really good players, and then you have people that are excited, watching it and embracing it, it's just you couldn't ask for a better environment.
Yeah, one thing, I lived up in Montreal for a couple of years, and I go up there frequently, and I've been up there for a couple Grey Cups. I saw one up there, and the one thing I grew to know about the Grey Cup is it's kind of like what you were just saying, was sort of you have there's a group that is always there. They're fans from all over the country that no matter who's playing, even if it's not their team, they're always going. And I guess that's sort of the same thing with the Memorial Cup, and it's great because it's almost like a big festival atmosphere, isn't it?
It is, and then you have your regional loyalties, right? And so you have your Western Hockey League loyalties, and you have your Ontario Hockey League loyalties, and your Quebec League, and then within it, right? You have a Maritime loyalty and a province of Quebec loyalty with Shawinigan and the St. John Sea Dogs. So they're the loyalties, the competitive rivalries, and it really makes it neat. When people they hear, like, for an example, people hear about Kaden Guhle, but to watch him up front, up close, and see, oh boy, geez, wow, he does skate great, right? We can use all the descriptive words that we want and talk about how players are, but when people see them, they kind of go, oh, okay, wow, oh, geez, I didn't realize he was that good, or what do you think of him? And I mean, the questions you're getting on players, on all types of players drafted by various teams, it's so much fun. And then the one thing about junior hockey, and this is the one thing, when you talk about the stars, because there's a real level of, they're a cut above. So when you start talking about Maverick Bourque or Xavier Bourgault or Kaden Guhle or Jake Neighbors or Mason, they deliver. You don't have to worry about them delivering, right? And that too makes it a lot of fun to, when people go, wow, geez, that guy, when do you think he'll be ready to play? So, just that excitement in their voices, not to just watch, but to see, whoever they root for, they're looking to the future to watch these young players come and perform for their team and help them win.
Yeah, Marco?
Well, I was actually going to ask you about your impressions of Guhle and also of Arber Xhekaj in this tournament, because I know those are two guys that you've spoken about a great deal over the last couple of days.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to say just about the tournament, just real quickly, before I talk about Kaden. Kaden was here in the last Memorial Cup in 2019.
Yep.
And obviously coming over to the Edmonton Oil Kings, he was a big addition. What I would say is that you have three championship teams coming to the Memorial Cup. They have gone through a long season and emerged on top of the mountain. And it's like they got to kind of, celebrate, kind of regroup and come back and try to, what I call, mounting up again. It's hard to do. And, you're guaranteed the two league champions at the very least will not win the Memorial Cup. And, there's a lot of disappointment that goes with that, but I say celebrate your season success. It is pretty impressive. So now when I talk about Kaden, Marco, I mean, to me, he's easy to talk about because, the way he plays the game, it just screams NHL. It screams 15, 16, 17, maybe whatever year career, because he just has such a maturity to his game. And that's certainly something that's progressed over time since he was drafted, even since he entered the Western Hockey League. But that ability to just really root in to a game that fits all his strengths, the skating. And it's not, we can talk about, but every area of his skating, the quickness, the agility, the leverage, the power, the speed. I mean, he can do so many different things. And it was interesting. I don't know if you saw at the beginning of the tournament, the players introduced themselves and they talked about who their favorite players were. And he chose Ryan McDonagh. And, I don't think that Kaden, when he was 17, was thinking that he was going to be a Ryan McDonagh type. Right. And that's part of the maturity, too, of understanding what you're getting. Now, I'd ask, we know Montreal drafted Ryan McDonagh in the first round. Who doesn't want a Ryan McDonagh type? Like, who doesn't want a Ryan McDonagh type, right? And so I really, yeah, good. I would say this about Kaden. I said it. I think he can play right now. Does that mean that he should play right now? That's not up to me. But watching how he has that real calmness and poise and composure to his game, along with the necessary skills, I think he's going to have a real significant impact on the Montreal Canadiens blue line for a long time. Now, when we go to Arber Xhekaj, people are asking me if I'm related to him because I talk so glowingly about him. But when you watch a player, really, is he one of your favorite sons? Well, when you watch a player develop the way Arber has developed, and everything I watch in his game, I think everything is developmental. I think he's unique. When I look at, there's defensemen and then there's players that are unique defensemen. And I think with his range, his skating, his initiative, and you start to think about how far he's come in his game. And now with his continued progress, some teaching and some development with him, the way he plays, he plays on his front foot, not on his back foot. He plays with a real competitive initiative. And, I think all those things, learning, he's going to just have to learn like all other defensemen. Less is more. But once he gets that all, I really do believe the Montreal Canadiens have a really good NHL prospect in Arber Xhekaj.
Absolutely. And I wanted to go back to the Kaden Guhle comment because we were talking about his development and his growth. And there's been a significant uptick in the way that he plays the game from the red line out since he's been traded to the Edmonton Oil Kings. I feel like he didn't have that in Prince Albert where he would jump the play a little bit more, he would pinch a little bit more, but also carry the puck longer. The puck statistically is on his stick 5 to 7 seconds more on average a game because he's taking the time to make the smart play as opposed to giving it away. Does that come with confidence, or do you think that the coaching staff in Edmonton kind of helped him develop that aspect of his game?
I would say all of those things, Marco. As you get older, right, you do gain confidence in your play. You gain confidence in saying, hey, I can do more of this because I am better and, I progressed, right? I think that anytime a team and a coach can instill that encouragement, hey, go and play that way, that helps the player too. The third thing I would add to that is that I think that Kaden has such an understanding of what surrounds him. He didn't have the same support group in Prince Albert. So, so he's not going to take, he's a player that's not going to take unnecessary risks. He's a player that's not going to put his team in any unnecessary peril. But now you end up coming over to Edmonton, it's a good team. So there's no unnecessary peril by him trying to do some of those things. He understands, hey, I got the backup. I have the support around me, and I can do more of those things. So, you take all of that, and we talk about, as you progress to the NHL and you try to take your game and put it in the NHL in a real productive manner, it's understanding all those different things. And we want players to be somewhere yesterday. It doesn't happen. And the maturation process takes time. So it's hard to be patient, and young players aren't patient. Young people aren't patient, right? And so you got to sometimes hey, pull back a little bit, be patient with it. But I'll just talk about hockey, right? You got a team that didn't have a good season. So there is a lot of excitement about the prospects, and there is a lot of excitement. Oh, when can they come in and help us? My view is when can they come in and help us be a team that can compete and be a good team, and they can be good contributors. These players can all come in and play, but they might not be ready to contribute yet. We got to be able to differentiate between that.
I want to ask you too, just in general, not just focus on Montreal here though, but just in terms of Memorial Cup, when you're talking about seeing if players are ready and seeing, do they have that poise that you referenced with Guhle? Have you had guys where you've gone to the Memorial Cup and maybe you weren't too high or too low? You knew about him, but then something stood out to you and you were like, wow, I mean, this kid's the real deal. What's some other guys that have done that for you?
Well, I mean, I think over time, there's a lot of drafted players. Like, when you come to the Memorial Cup, it's not always about players that are, entering the draft. A lot of times, you do have times, but a lot of times you're coming to it and you're watching players that have been good players. Like, let's take Edmonton for an example. I mean, Dylan Guenther isn't playing, and that's unfortunate for them. But first rounder, Jake Neighbors, first rounder, Brendan Guhle, Kaden Guhle, first rounder, Sebastian Cossa, first rounder, right? So Maverick Borg, Xavier Borgo, Mason McTavish. I'm naming some of the 7 first round. So you get an opportunity to test your own evaluations.
Okay,
like, are they progressing? So from an individual team point of view, you can say, hey, geez, wow, our guy is like, look at how good he's playing, right? But from just an overall evaluation process, you kind of go, yeah, I was right about him. And I asked Danny Marr this, the director of Central Scouting. We had him on during an intermission a couple of games ago. And he said that, it is good when you project players to be first-round picks or to be good players and you rate them. And then you come back and you say, oh, yeah, I was right about that player. The same thing with anybody that's evaluating players. And, it's no different for you, Jimmy, or for you, Marco. We want to build that confidence that when we're evaluating players, but then you need to see it, right? It's not just like, well, we did it today and it's over. It's like, okay, yeah, I was right. And it's going to help you as you move forward. So I think that's what the Memorial Cup, I mean, there's so many players that do it. I remember when Portland won in 1998 and we had drafted Brendan Morrow in the first round the year before. Marian Hossa had gone there to play. Ottawa had drafted him at the same time. But I'll tell you the player that really stood out for me, and I ended up trading for him in Calgary, was Andrew Ference.
Oh, yeah?
You're watching him, like he was like I don't know what he was, a 9th round draft pick or whatnot. But and having watched him, but now you're watching him go from here to here, and it stays with you because it's championship caliber play. It's hard play. It's demanding play. So when you have that glimpse of a player, you have a little bit more confidence in saying, like, not that you're going, okay, we're going to trade for Andrew, but you're going, let's get him and see what he can do for us because he's shown some things right. Like to say Marian Hossa, well, no kidding, Craig. Like, no kidding, Marian Hossa is good. But that was one guy that I just remember so clearly. And I don't know what it was. We traded for him when I went to Calgary. I don't know what it was 3 or 4 years later. I just forget the timing. But that was a big part of it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at, right? I mean, Marco, too, like sometimes we're guilty in the media and even teams are guilty, typecasting players, right? And kind of putting them, this is who this guy is, but you don't really know until you see him, and especially when you see him in a clutch situation like that. Marco?
Yeah, well, we were actually talking about that for this year and in terms of the evaluation of players for this upcoming draft, because that, we have the Memorial Cup on one end, but then like 2 weeks later is the draft. And a lot of players are coming up. And I know you've already positioned yourself and your opinion on that. And this is, in my honest opinion, probably the most over-talked draft, because unlike last year or the year before, where we just didn't have hockey or we had a little bit of hockey, this was the most uninterrupted hockey we've had since about 2019, as we said before. The topic at hand in this city right now is the first overall pick. And I know that you had talked about, there you go. I know you had talked about, Shane Wright has always been your number one. I just wanted to get your discussion or your opinion on this, because there's a lot of talk about the top 3 being close to each other. But for you, what sets Wright apart at number one that you would pick him, basically?
Yeah, and you're right. They are close. It would be, think back to a couple of drafts. Think back to the draft when Jack Hughes went first. Capo Caco was really good, and there was maybe Capo Caco should go. Austin Matthews went first. There became a lot of talk about Patrick Laine. We're talking about the Hart Trophy winner, Austin Matthews, an elite player. I mean, Jack Hughes is just really now coming into his own as a real top flight player. Exactly, Marco. So like the drafts are closer, like even with top players, right? And like unless your name is Lemieux and if we go back to Mario Lemieux, and there was talk about him not even being the best player, right? Like, he only had 131 goals or whatever he had. Like,
no biggie.
No biggie. But I mean, it's the conversation that goes around. So I do think it's close. So, I think what you just talked about, Marco, is that, an uninterrupted season, which also gives you a chance to watch the players over a continuous span of time. And the players get to perform and show you how they're progressing over a period of time. I've had the luxury of seeing Shane play since he was 14. No, I didn't watch him a lot. And then at 15, you obviously get those opportunities. But there is that developmental period where not all the players, but a lot of players, there was a gap there. There was a real gap. For Shane Wright and the Ontario kids, it was 18 months. For the Western kids, playing in a bubble, what was it? So we did miss those opportunities. So now to go back to your question, when I watch Shane and you're evaluating him, so hockey sense and puck skills and playmaking and understanding of the game and skating and everything, to me, he was a player that always stood out as one of the very best, if not the best, in his age group. One of the things that we have to be very cognizant of, a lot of other players in that age group haven't identified themselves yet. And then you got to track them. Like two players that I was blown away when I started to watch them in the fall was Jimmy Snuggerud and Cutter Gauthier. I was blown away. I went to myself, I go, oh my God, these guys, they weren't even like players like on that 04 US team that you kind of go, okay, they're there. And then they just got better and better. Well, they had the opportunity to show you, right? So you're evaluating everything versus, a player like Shane Wright. And Slavkovsky's a good player and Guhle's a good player. But at the end of the evaluation, I kept saying to myself, the hockey sense isn't better. The skating isn't better. I don't think the playmaking is better. Logan Guhle might have a little bit more offensive creativity and imagination. His hands might be a little, but then you factor it in with the size and the other parts of the game. It would be great if everybody looked just like Logan Guhle. And we're just comparing Logan Guhle 1, Logan Guhle 2, Logan Guhle 3. You just check it down. It's when you do, you want to buy a TV and you want to buy a 48-inch, you can do a comparison, right? Okay, this 48-inch TV. Well, the players are all different sizes and they're all different types, right? Like so. As I went through it, and the headline, headlines are never. What you do is you consider. Is there a player that you think is better than Shane Wright? And at the end of it, when I did the finalists, I just couldn't make a case for somebody being better than Shane Wright. Does that mean that there might not be a player better than him? No. Does that not mean that other players shouldn't be considered ahead of him? No. But that's where I left myself at the end. And, and I think it's important to say this, Marco, and I've said it in a couple of other places. I kept hearing that, and over time I kept hearing, wow, he doesn't pull you out of your seat. He doesn't have a wow factor. There's not a lot of flash and dash. And I went back to Jerome McGinley when we drafted Jerome McGinley in 1995. And I can't begin to tell you how many NHL teams came up to us. What did you see in Jerome? What did you see in Jerome? What did you see in Jerome? And I kept thinking back, geez, this seems to be a lot of the common theme. I never heard people say, geez, he's not smart. I'm talking about Shane Wright here now. Well, you can't skate. Are you concerned about this? Are you concerned about, it was always about these things that to me don't really matter. And so it went back. I came back to Jerome McGinley in 1995. And again, we know, if we go back to the 2017 draft, Miro Heiskanen went ahead of Cale Makar. Miro Heiskanen's a really good player. But the best player right now, clearly, and 2 years ago, everybody was talking about Elias Pettersson being the best player.
Yes.
Today, the best player is Cale Makar, right? Yeah. So here we go, 3, 4, 5. I just named, because the other two players, Nolan Patrick, he's a washout. And I'm not here to jump on Nolan. And Nico Hischier's just a really good second-line center. The best. So that's how much things change and you go in. And I think for Montreal, Marco, picking first overall, they want to make sure that they get Cale Makar. That's what you get when you're the first overall pick. Or when you have the first overall, you want to make sure that you get the best guy. And that's part of the evaluation and part of the process. And I think it's a good discussion and a good examination to go through. Forget about us doing it, but for the Montreal Canadiens to do it.
Well, Marco, I think Mike Morial a couple of weeks back, we talked about the whole wow factor thing versus the intangibles and the real things that guys should be looking, or scouts should be looking for. And I'm just wondering, Marco, you could talk to this too. I feel like unfortunately, with you're saying this happened way back when you drafted Jerome McGinley, but I feel like it's even fivefold now because of social media and YouTube, and so much gets caught up in that wow factor instead of really looking deeper into the player and seeing who the player is and who the person is and what am I really drafting here. I'm not drafting just for some flashy thing. I need to know that I have a guy that I can depend on for years to come. How much to you, Craig, has social media kind of even made it worse?
Well, I don't know if it's worse or the scrutiny is just a lot more intense. And when we talk about the Montreal Canadiens, I mean, we're talking about a fan base that's wired in, zeroed in, and that's what makes it. I mean, when we talk about the Montreal Canadiens being a religion, in Quebec, I mean, it really is. I mean, that's how strong people feel about the Montreal Canadiens. So, when you consider about, and it's not just social media, it's the number of people that are involved now in evaluating players. And I love it. People ask me all the time, what do you think about this person? I said, hey, listen, people are doing the work. People are investing their time and their efforts in the work. And and that makes us all better. We can consider different opinions. We can look at, I didn't think about that. And I do it all the time. So actually, I think for social media, in terms of in terms of the evaluation, I enjoy it. And I like it. And the scrutiny helps. I believe it helps me be better because, and Marco, you can speak to this too.
Yeah.
Like working with a team, you can bounce ideas off with your reports. You can bounce ideas off of others. We don't really get that opportunity to have a group that we can bounce ideas. Somebody that can say, Craig, have you considered this? Oh, geez, I didn't. Craig, what about this? Well, he does this, right? Yeah. So, social media and people that are fully invested in the evaluation process, to me, help me consider things that I don't have the opportunity to talk about. So I don't see it. Yeah, it really does.
And we also had Pierre Maguire on last week talking about the quality of this draft. And Pierre wasn't as high as most on the quality of this draft.
That's an understatement.
Stopping short of comparing it to 1999. He says it's just above that. I mean, I'm personally of the fan that this is a pretty much average draft, and that the lack of consensus at the top is what's really dragging down the reputation. That's me, and that's something I've gone on record on radio time and time again for. I really just wanted to get your take on this. Like, is this really that weak of a draft? Is it that bad? Is it simply just because we're paying too much attention at the top and not enough in the middle?
I think you nailed it. I think you absolutely nailed it. Yeah. It is about the top. The drafts so much of the time get defined by the top, right? And so, you can only take a draft for what's in it. You can't force a draft to have a Connor McDavid or an Austin Matthews. It either has those players or it doesn't. But over time, this is what happens. And people, it's not a very good draft. It, and I know it. Okay, we all know it here. Okay, in 4 or 5 years' time, we're going to look at the draft, and we're going to see players drafted later in the first round, into the second round, into the third round that end up being really good players. Who thought Jake Gensel was going to be a 40-goal scorer in the NHL? Who thought Johnny Gaudreau was going to be a point-a-game player? Who thought Nikita Kucherov was going to do what he did, or Braden Point? Or the best player in the 2012 draft is Andrei Vasilevsky. He went 19. And everybody goes, you can't draft a goaltender in the first round. Oh, you can't. Oh, okay, that's fine. The best player in the 2012 draft was Andrei Vasilevsky. So we know through history that there's going to be all-stars, Hall of Famers. And, 1999, as I go back, the Hall of Fame announcement's going to be made Monday. You could have two guys that were picked 2 and 3 that might get announced. Exactly. And so I've heard it over the years and everything, but Marco, I think you've absolutely captured it. It gets mentioned at the top of the draft. Now, I mean, I use this, and it's a long time ago, but I think it's illustrative of what happens. I talked about Haskin and Makar, Pettersson going 3, 4, 5. In the 1988 draft, all the discussion was about Modano and Linden. They were 2 very different players. So Modano goes 1, Linden goes 2. Now I'm going to read off how this went. Number 3 was Curtis Lecision. Number 4 was Darren Shannon. Number 5 was Daniel Dore. Number 6 was Scott Pearson. Okay. 3, and Curtis had a real good, solid career. At 7 was Marty Gelinas. Okay. Pretty good junior player, got traded Gretzky. Okay. At 8 was that high school player from there, Jeremy Roenick, 500 goals, 1,000 points. At 9 was that tier 2 junior A player from Notre Dame, Rod Brindamore, who's drafting and then at 10 was the great Timo Solani. Oh, geez, he's a Finnish player. 8, 9, and 10, Solani's in the Hall of Fame. I think Roenick should be in the Hall of Fame. Brindamore should get consideration for the Hall of Fame, right? They went 8, 9, and 10 for different reasons. And we can always go through them. And, I don't know what people were saying in 1988 about the draft, but turned out to be pretty special at 8, 9, and 10. Yeah. And we're gonna get that all the time. But when it's not easily identifiable, we tend to doubt it. and that's okay too. That's okay too.
Amen. Mark, you got anything else?
Well, no, I think that was incredible, and I remember a lot of people thinking that 2017.
We can go a couple more minutes. We can go a few more minutes. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was actually just gonna.
Sure StreamYard doesn't cut us off here, but if they do, we'll figure it out.
So basically, my last point was we were talking about 2017. A lot of people thought the same way about 2017 because they were simply just paying attention to Nolan versus Hischier, right? And that's what it was. And yet we look back on that draft today and you can pull out, really good names like Pettersson, Makar, Heiskanen, Suzuki, Brandstrom's still developing. There's a lot of guys further down that draft that did really well, like Josh Norris, Robert Thomas, et cetera. It's a long list. And the depth was ignored because of the lack of a superstar like a Connor Bedard at the top. And I think, and this is, I guess, where I wanted to kind of bring it is the 2023 draft looking as deep as it is in that top 10, kind of casting a shadow on this draft right now. Are a lot of people looking at the next year like that mean we all know and love, and kind of ignoring the talent that's in front of them, because the fan base right now is kind of, talking about, hey, we have 14 picks, 3 of which are in the top 33. Is this a draft where we should just move up, or are we going to get quality at 26 or 33?
Well, and you're right. So when a Connor Bedard comes onto the scene, right? It becomes pretty darn exciting, right? And as it should be. Players like him don't come along very often, right? So it does cast a shadow over this year's draft. There's just no way it can't cast a shadow, because you start to compare number 1 overall picks, or potential number 1 overall picks with what looks really nice in the future. And there's no question. Here's the way I would answer it. I wouldn't answer it. I would offer this, is that if Connor Bedard was in this draft, there would be no discussion about who the first pick was. There'd be no discussion. It would be slam dunk, and that's not a knock against it, but that's how slam dunk it would be. It would be slam dunk. Connor's the guy, right? But the specter of a potential superstar coming up for the next draft, and not in and I would say this, not an identifiable superstar for the 2022 NHL draft. We all use different comparable types. I've compared Shane Wright to Patrice Bergeron. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, but he's not a superstar, and nobody would ever describe him as a superstar. But that's the difference when we're talking about the level of talent from one year to another. But what I will say is, I say this all the time, if you are able, and I'm just going to take the first round back to 26-33, Marco, if you can get a player out of the first round that you drafted from that becomes a regular NHL player, I'm not talking about first, you want quality, you're doing really, really well. And what ends up happening, NHL teams do it, fan bases, we tend to start to blow it up. The media blows it up. You know what? There doesn't appear to be any great player at this point in time for the 2022 NHL draft. Could that change? Potentially. But now you got to change your sights and realize what you're dealing with and be realistic about what the draft class is and just zero in. What do we want? What's offered there? What can we get at this point in time? And if you have multiple picks, I'm a big believer. You have multiple picks. That gives you a chance, maybe a little bit, to hit a long ball. And when I say a long ball, I'm talking about a home run. If you step up to the plate trying to hit a single, you're probably going to hit a single. You're not going to hit a home run. Now, if you step up trying to hit a home run, you might strike out, but if you don't try to take the big swing, I think it's a lot easier to do that when you have multiple picks. Montreal Canadiens multiple. Yeah, well, exactly. Well, again, you might get it into the gap, and if you got speed like Tim Raines did, you might be able to stretch it into a triple. So, So anyway, so that's where it's at. So I think the multiple picks give you that opportunity to say, "Oh, we're taking a guy here. Like we think that guy." And if it doesn't become, but at least you have that opportunity. I think there's some players that fit the bill that they're worth taking a swing on. But it's a lot easier to do it when you have multiple picks.
Speaking of multiple picks and having the amount of picks that the Canadiens have or other teams that have those multiple picks, how much do you expect right now teams trying to get 2023 picks for some of these picks that they have that maybe they know they don't, I shouldn't say don't need to use, but they're willing to part with? How much are they going to ask to get a 2023 pick?
Well, it's not so much like it's going to be other teams looking to get extra picks that are going to look at the teams with these multiple picks and go, we want to pick in this year's draft. Because, the Calgary Flames had 3 picks. That's all they have. I think they picked in the 2nd round and the 5th round, the 7th round, right? So they could be a team. Montreal has 14 picks, right? I can tell you this. If they absolutely went 100%, they have no chance to sign 14 players out of this draft in entry level. They have no chance. It's an impossible task. Mm-hmm. So if you go in and you think you want to use all 14 picks, and you go in confidently, hey, listen, the draft, you're picking, this is the guy I want. Yeah, we think him. The history tells you that a 6th-round pick has not a very high chance of playing NHL games. But you believe it because that's what you should do in a scouting exercise. But if you hit on every one and had 100% mark, you can never sign all 14. You just can't. It's impossible. Yeah. So to maneuver around, it's not just what Montreal in this case looking to do with those picks, whether it be making a trade to get a player that can help their team now or another young prospect that's already signed. But other teams are going to be pursuing the Montreal Canadiens and the Arizona Coyotes. Who have all those picks, because you can't put all that. You just have no opportunity to throw that many players into your system and sign them under the CBA and the roster limits and everything to go with it. So that's how I see it. Like it'll work. It'll cut both ways.
Okay.
The teams with the picks look and move, and teams without picks, they've already circled. Hey, can we get?
Call Ken Hughes right now. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, there's a few players, and I guess this will be like the last question I have for you. There's a few players in this draft that do look like home run picks that have these high potential, but are falling on certain lists. And I'm thinking about guys like Brad Lambert, Frank Nazar, Connor Geekie has fallen on a lot of people's lists. The type of like high end risks you take, as opposed to the tail end of the draft, where a lot of teams, especially playoff teams, try to play it safe, draft the center or the defenseman that has a very high floor in their estimation, but not necessarily the highest ceiling. Are those kinds of targets that one would see kind of movement for it in a draft like this?
Well, yes, absolutely, because every list is going to be different, and some players are going to be rated higher. So let's just take Brad Lambert for an example. So he burst onto the scene as a 15-year-old. And for Brad, he was one of very few players that had identified himself early in this draft. Like I said, I didn't know anything about Cutter Gauthier or Jimmy Snuggerud or Logan Cooley or Joachim Kemmel for that matter. When Brad was showing his way into the, but now as you watch other players and at the same time you're juxtaposing it with the evaluation of Brad Lambert. But if you look at him and maybe Marco, it's a lot like Atu Ratu.
Yeah.
Right. Like, last year, a player that was promising didn't have but again, you have multiple picks and you start to go and whether it be late in the first round or, in the second round, you're going like, that's a guy that we really liked. We're going to take him. Right. And so again, if you think somebody at that point, right, has a chance to be a top 6 forward with the skating ability, right, you take him. Well, why do you want to have something that's safe and you go, oh, well, we at least know he might be a 4th line grinder. And there's been lots of examples of that, well, we know what we're getting. Okay, great. Yeah, so does everybody else. But what could you have got? And I think that type of thinking, like there's certain elements you need to have to be considered for the draft. But when you start talking about ceilings and you talk about potential, hey, throw it down on that. Especially, and we're not talking about, hey, you know what, we're going to take player whatever. Just pick a. I mean, yeah. I'm just going to say, Jimmy Jones. You're taking Jimmy Jones. You're not jumping up and going, well, we're going to take Jimmy Jones at 1 because we really think that that's not where you do it, right? But you do it in other parts of the draft. And I'm like I said, if you get a regular NHL player, you're doing really well. So why not try to get the best player that can be a regular NHL player and go from there? And I think that's where there's real opportunity.
All right, final question I got for you, Craig, and it's kind of a off the beaten path one. Give us maybe one of your most comical memories from a draft, working it as a GM or as a broadcaster, something that stands out that you look back on with a laugh.
Well, I'll tell you my favorite one was, favorite. It's not really favorite because it's, we can all look at lists and we can all look at previous drafts and go, oh, well, they did this, they did that. But you never get an idea of what you didn't do, right? So, and what was considered. So I'll tell you guys, go back to the 1998 NHL draft. And you can take a quick peek at it. And you can look at what the Dallas Stars did. So it got to our pick, and that was the year where Pierre Lacroix was trying to corner the draft to get Vincent Lecavalier. So he had like 4 first-round draft picks and, was trying to get – no, he didn't. He ended up drafting Alex Tongue. He was trying to move some players around. Anyway, long story short, we won the President's Trophy that year. So we were picking 28th, I think, 27th, whatever it was. So it came to our pick. And we really, really, really liked this player. We really liked him. But we looked at him and we go, geez, we can get 2 second-round picks. And, it could be really something that could help us. And there was other players we liked. And we thought, we'll get 2 picks. More than that, we said, we have a lot of centers. So we're not going to take this center and we're going to trade back for these two other picks. You know who the player was drafted with our pick?
Gagne?
Scott Gomez.
Yep.
They traded up.
The last one. Yeah, that's true.
They traded up. We had so many centers that we didn't. It would be one thing if we didn't like Scott, if we didn't hold him in high regard.
Yeah.
We got lots of centers. We'll just trade back and get 2 picks. We ended up drafting John Erskine and Tyler Bouck. And so John had some NHL games. He was a rugged defenseman. Tyler had his career cut short because of some concussions, but a hard-nosed 3rd line, 4th line winger, right? And 2 years later, Scott Gomez won the Rookie of the Year and was a big part of the New Jersey Devils team that beat us in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah,
so
it happens.
But like nobody would look at that and go like, oh, New Jersey, what a great pick at 28 but unless you dig deeper.
Yeah.
Like, what were we like? We were thinking right.
Yeah.
Until we thought wrong.
Yeah. Well, good on you to admit that.
Well, I mean, again, like you asked me about a story. I mean, I'm telling you, like, but I know the people that I worked with, we laughed. Like, we had too many centers. Like, oh, God, like, what the hell?
You never have too many centers.
Yeah. Well, Marco, I would say that's exactly. But like, again, right on the player, right on the scouting evaluation, right on the scouting process, right? Then we all thought ourselves.
Well, what are you going to do? Well, listen, hey, pleasure to have you on, Craig. We really appreciate it. We hope you have a great time at the Memorial Cup, and we look forward to seeing you in Montreal for the draft.
You're going to see me in Montreal. I look forward to seeing you guys. Thanks for having me on.
We'll find you.
We might have to get you a pint down at McLean's, all right? We'll talk to you soon.
Just one?
No, many.
Okay. Well, I didn't hear plural come out of your mouth, Jim.
Well, their slogan is a pint too many. So there you go. Have a good one, man.
Thanks.
Great.
You too.
TSN joining us here. He's Marco D'Amico. I'm Jimmy Murphy. We'll talk to you next week on the Montreal Hockey Now podcast.